All right, we'll do a little word association. I'm going to spell something, and I'm going to challenge you to be quiet as I finish. Spect. Quiet right now, because all of you right now are probably thinking about Aretha Franklin, and you're going to feel it, but you all struggling. I've never seen so many bit tongues in my life than I just saw right there. 58 years ago, Aretha Franklin saying Respect. Saying it so well that you don't even know that it was actually 2 years older. It was Otis Redding's song. She took it and changed it, rearranged it, and Otis Redding has not been thought about with that song ever since, right? Respect. That's probably a word that you can all spell. Over the course of our nights this summer, we've been talking about characteristics of a Christian. And tonight we're going to talk about the characteristic of respect. And I want you to think about it in just a second, but I want you to look at the picture that you see up here on the screen. And there's a reason that I chose this picture to put up here on the screen. You might look at this and you say, okay, well, this picture looks a little childish, right? This looks like something that would be in the Bible school classes or something like that. Well, there's a reason for it. Because I think that respect is a childish thing that we teach our children, but then we sometimes throw it completely away once we get older. And so we're going to talk about this as a characteristic of a Christian. I want to talk about it as something that we learned a long time ago, and our hope is that we'll keep doing it as we get a little bit older. Hopefully, that's the case. You know, sometimes when we talk about respect, we talk about it in different ways. Different people are disrespectful in one way or the other. Rich people and poor people, powerful and powerless, right? Christians and non-Christians. And sometimes we talk about people being disrespectful, but sometimes it's us being disrespectful toward others as well. You know, quite often these disrespectful things dominate headlines, right? They dominate social interactions. We're in the middle of the NBA playoffs, and a lot of times the players will say, well, I felt like that team was disrespectful toward us, right? They didn't give us the proper respect perhaps that we deserve. We're going to talk about that a little bit tonight. That respect is not merely about being polite, but respect should also reflect in our faith a reverence toward God. We talked a bit about that this morning. Recognition that others are made in the image of God as well. Let's talk about first what it is. What is respect? If I were to ask you to define respect, pull a sheet of paper out and write a definition of what respect is, what would you come up with? Okay. Well, I've got three up here, and I would say that yours might be that. But you might say, well, admire is a definition of respect. I think that would be fitting. I think that would work as a definition. When you admire someone, you feel respect toward them, you appreciate them, you approve them, perhaps is a word that we would say. And you might feel it often because of their qualities, because of their accomplishments, maybe because of their behavior. So the people that you admire, perhaps you have a bit of respect for them. I'm sure there are people in your life, people that you know that you admire, but there may be people in your sort of world, as it were, that you don't actually know, but you have a lot of respect toward. It might be people of significance, maybe famous people, or maybe people that are not famous, but that you would admire them, right? So if you didn't say admire, you might would say look up to, right? You look up to someone. Maybe that is a form of respect. You might want to be like them or to possess their qualities. Is there somebody that when you were younger that you looked up to? Ben always talks about when he was young, he said when he was little, he looked up to Pete Rose as a baseball player, right? He tried to, hold his bat the way he did and stick his hips out the way he did. And a couple of weeks ago, I watched a documentary about Pete Rose, and he's the most unlook-up-to-able person just about that there was. He wasn't very nice at all, but was a great baseball player. And, sometimes we can have respect for people even if we don't necessarily always agree with them, right? I dare say that a lot of people that we looked up to growing up might not have had any interest in looking down, or maybe they were looking down on us, as it were. But we can admire someone's abilities without necessarily wanting to have all of their qualities. So look up to could be one. What else is respect? Well, maybe you said somebody that you are willing to listen to. I find it hard to listen if I don't respect the person that's talking. That's unfortunate, and I have to work with that. I have to struggle with that sometimes. But maybe if we respect, we listen to. It's not just hearing the words that come out of their mouth, but it's also paying attention to the meaning of what they're saying, the feeling of what they're saying, the intent of what they're saying. And sometimes we struggle with that as well. And so however you define respect, it could be one of those three or something else. Maybe the better question is not how I define it, but how do I show respect? Well, this place to start, and we're going to start tonight, is respect for God. And we're going to start in the book of Mark, chapter 12, verses 28 through 30. So if you've got your Bible handy, I would ask you to turn to those handful of verses. We're going to look at that to begin with. Mark chapter 12, verse 28 through 30. And we start in verse 28, we'll read here that it says, "Then one of the scribes came, and having heard them reasoning together, perceiving that he," this is Jesus, "had answered them well, asked, is the first commandment of all." Question.